I think I didn't share the video for the intro, but I hope you had the music.
Excellent, and welcome to this week's issue of the Dr. Tech Show, where our brilliant the brainchild this was of John Popham and his panel of helpers guide you to the world of online communications. Unfortunately, once again, John is unable to join us with this show, but Swain and I and our special guest, and now becoming a regular, Paul Clayton, will do our best to guide you to the world of online communications. We're not expecting him, but if John and anyone else who's listening does pop in, that'll be a bonus. So, my co-presenters today, how's the weather where you are? Swain, how are things with you?
Dull, grey, getting more autumnal by the week.
And Paul, where are you and how are things with you?
Well, I'm in southeast London, and as we speak, the sun is poking its head out. It's been pretty grey morning.
All right. Well, I am still in Ireland. I'm in Galway, and I can see white, so I presume that's clouds. And the forecast isn't great for today, so I think we'll all be glad to be indoors. So, as usual, we have something to mark the day or the week that's in it. And today, being the 21st of September, is International Day of Peace, which was established in 1981. And the 2020 theme for this day is Shaping Peace Together. And the UN General Assembly has declared this day as a day devoted to strengthening the ideals of peace through observing 24 hours of non-violence and ceasefire. And obviously this year has been clearer than ever. We are not each other's enemies, but our common enemy is the virus, COVID virus, that threatens our health, security, and our very way of life. COVID-19 has thrown the world into turmoil and reminded us that one part of the planet, what happens there, can impact people everywhere. So in these difficult times of physical distancing, this International Day of Peace is dedicated to fostering dialogue and collecting ideas. And the world is invited to unite and share thoughts on how to weather this storm, heal our planet and change it for the better. So even though we may not be able to stand together next to each other, we can still dream together. So I hope that appeals to both of you, wherever you are. Peace is a perennial thing to celebrate, I think, and it's good to be reminded of that. We're also celebrating Recycle Week, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more later in the show, but it's 21st to 27th of September is Recycle Week, and the theme this year is Thanking the Nation, Together We Recycle. I'm sure we've heard plenty about that in our various identities around this latest time of what's happening to us all. So this is the 17th year of Recycle Week, and it's organised by WRAP, which is the Waste and Resources Action Programme, which was established in 2000. And this year, the theme will thank the nation for continuing to recycle despite the challenges that COVID-19 has presented under the banner Together We Recycle. And WRAP wants Recycle Week 2020 to recognise the sacrifices that key workers and citizens have made to keep recycling going and create positive change in the world around us. Our recycling and waste key workers have heroically carried on collecting while the world slowed down around them. So recycling, what does that what does that play a part of in your lives, Swain and Paul? What does it mean to you?
Well, okay. Swain?
Well, I try and do as little recycling as I possibly can, because it's not as good as reusing or just not having stuff to start with. But certainly for things like glass bottles and tin cans, particularly aluminium or that sort of thing, I try and anything that I do use and which becomes waste that I can't reuse in its current form, I certainly try and make sure it goes in the right green bin, and then the green bin goes out on the right day, and then hopefully recycling can occur.
Well, I try to just recycle the usual things because it just ends up being hoarded and never used, unfortunately. I don't subscribe to the sticky back plastic and plastic bottle making of things, unfortunately. I wish I did. I do try to make sure the batteries leave the house and go to an appropriate recycling place, because I once had a job for Duracell blowing up batteries by putting a charge into them, and then I'd put them into a big metal bin, and I was then asking where that big metal bin went, and someone said off the sea, the bottom of the sea, just outside of Belgium. And I thought, oh dear, sort of, yeah, a bit unfortunate that. So I'm very keen to try and recycle. If they just take everything away, and I think it's very true in some cases, especially in the city. But I have seen them, like a nature watcher at night. One time I did see them come by 3 o'clock in the morning. The guys that took the clear bags away for the recycling, they do exist.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's important to do it where we can. I think
There's quite a lot of myths
especially
around.
aluminium.
There's quite a lot of, especially aluminium. There's quite a lot of myths around what local authorities do with the recycling that the recyclates that they collect. I mean, I know for sure that not only are our recyclates here in Orkney sent somewhere appropriate and meaningful in terms of recycling, but also our general waste is sent to Shetland, where they burn it and recover the heat to power their community heating system in Lerwick. So I feel possibly less awful about using plastic, knowing that it's not going to end up in landfill. It's going to end up burnt and powering the warm homes of the good people of Lerwick. So we still must try to use as little plastic as possible. But for me, it's more a question of how it's disposed of. That's the most important question, rather than purely about how much of it we actually use. So I know that if I put a piece of plastic in my bin, it's not going to end up in the sea. It's going to end up in a incinerator to make energy.
I think Paul's point about batteries is one well made.
Yes.
A lot of supermarkets offer recycling of batteries things now, but it's very easy to forget to bring the batteries to this supermarket when you're going shopping. So I try to remember when I've used up a battery to put it in the shopping trolley, so that when we get to the shops, I know that it's there. So it's a sequence, isn't it? Trying to get into the sequence of making it easy for yourself to recycle, and making it a big production, really. So yeah, my mother always said, a place for everything and everything in its place. So yeah, that's one of those things that it's good to remember. Recycling of digital stuff, though. I mean, maker spaces obviously are great places for where you can recycle or reuse bits that you don't use anymore. But I'm sure we all have boxes of cables and stuff lying around that we think, there's definitely going to be a use for 20 kettle end cables at some stage. Yes,
the well-known cartoon person really decides to keep box of cables he's kept for 10 years for one more year.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be a
yes,
demand.
I had an interesting perspective on the recycling of electronics, and that is that obviously there's lots of rare elements in printed circuit boards and in electronics generally, and someone was suggesting that the time is coming when renewable energy might be available cheaply enough to, rather than deassemble these things and use components and throw bits away and so on, you could just melt electronic equipment and extract the metals and so on from the melted thing. At the moment, that's far too expensive, I was told the other day, because of the cost of the energy. But as energy prices come down, and particularly if it's energy that otherwise can't be fed into the grid for some reason and is able to be stored, there's more hope for getting more of the precious, difficult to mine, ethically compromised ingredients out of electronic devices as they're recycled. I thought that was quite an interesting way to look at it, and it just comes down to how much the energy is going to cost to make it even vaguely economically feasible.
I find, as a person who I was actually at it this weekend, I pass on all pieces of hardware to other people. I sort of keep them use. So I stick all operating systems or Linux onto all the computers. I received one the other day that was covered in gunk and dust and stuff. And then someone gave me a laser printer, a little laser printer, which I then passed on to an artist colleague who needed it. So this is the case for keeping your cables, Pauline.
it's
The only
not
case
for,
I've
it's not
got.
for me, you understand. It's for the people I'm going to help in the
That's
future.
right.
Great, that's
we did-
fantastic.
we did hear from a guest we had earlier in an earlier show, phones for patients, and they were recycling not just the devices but also the cables, because often
Yeah.
in that case people go into hospitals and they have their phone but it's not charged. They're not expecting to go to hospital, so they have their phone or the device but it's not charged. So in that case, a charger, a spare charger, is invaluable.
Absolutely, yes.
is.
And of course that is not recycling, that is reuse, which is much better.
Yeah.
Because recycling involves taking things to bits or chemically or changing their state. Whereas if you just put Linux on a laptop and give it to somebody else, that's even better because it's reusing the thing in its current form.
I think the problem is, again, with trying to insert another operating system on a mobile phone. I think mobile phones are the curse digitally, really. More mobile phones than people. They're actually not well maintained. The software and firmware on them, it's actually known they're a security risk now if you have a refurbished phone quite often. Apple are a little bit better because I think you can still get updates for a 6S.
You can. I have a 6S. I think it's 6. The plain 6 is the oldest phone, which is now becoming problematic.
Yeah. So I think there is a case for really being able to pull all the recycle phones a lot better. There was a company that would buy your phone off you, but these phones I have sitting around are so old they just have no value whatsoever, other than they're in components.
And they are the candidates for recycling to recover the elements from them.
Well, interestingly, we will be talking to Chris Ashworth and Ross McCulloch in next week's show about the Reboot project, which is about recycling devices that aren't being used anymore. So we'll be asking them about that and about what the security measures are. Obviously, that's going to be very important. But it sounds like we should encourage RAP to think about having a reuse week before a recycling week. Maybe next year could be
good idea.
Great.
Because I don't think that's become a priority, and until you said it, Swain, it didn't click that obviously reusing is better than recycling.
It's a hierarchy, isn't it? It's reduce, don't have so much stuff, so keep your phone for longer. Reuse, as Paul was saying, try to give it to somebody else or find another use for it as it is. And only if you can't do those two things, it does recycling come into the picture. Recycling's kind of got overemphasized because of because it's relatively straightforward for the government to insist that local authorities do it, but reuse and reduction particularly are problematic concepts because of course if you're not buying as much stuff, then you're not as valuable into the conventional forms of economic growth as you might be wanted to be, and so there are all sorts of issues there.
Well, if our friend Helen Reynolds can institute a new celebration day like last week she did Social Media Managers Day, then I'm sure we can
there must
start
be a
new reuse day or
there must be one.
Well, if there isn't one, we can instigate it. So let's have a look at the stories that we've been picking up on in the last week or so. And the first one out of the gate is the French government, who are spending 250 million euro on digital inclusion, and this was a story picked up from TechCrunch. And the information is that the French government, is also going to spending this money on digital inclusion with public agents helping elderly citizens and simpler administrative services. France already allocated some money for digital inclusion in the past, but the previous plan was only 18 million, so they've certainly bumped it up. 250 million euro sounds a very decent budget for digital inclusion. I'm not sure if they said yet how they're going to spend. Oh yeah, they're going to spend it. Sort of investment. This is a part of a bigger stimulus package, infrastructure investment, startup investment, digital transformation. So it sounds like they have some plans for it. I'm sure it'd be great to hear our government in the UK talking about spending this much money. We've had this again on previous shows where devices.now was rolled out, but the government wasn't committing to spending, the money that needed to make it work. So it's good to see another government doing that and making it possible for us to, to see it happening and then encourage it in our local areas. And then the story after that was Leeds Kindness Festival which was 6th to 12th September. And I know it's going back a bit, but Leeds does seem to have a kind of a program for digital inclusion that's advanced more than some other cities. Certainly, in Birmingham, where I'm based, I always point out what Leeds is doing as a good example of what other things can be done. And this Kindness Festival week, while not centering on digital, it did seem to bring some of the values of this program, for example, to the fore. The Kindness Revolution, they were calling it, at Kinder Leeds, aims to give people an experience of what a city of kindness, compassion and well-being could be like, and a glimpse into how things could be different for everyone, including those who are most often excluded. And they had a different theme each day, exploring subjects such as kinder businesses, kinder relationships and self-kindness. I'm sure Swain and Paul, you can both, encourage kindness in what we're doing as a better way maybe of making change than enforcement or, sort of the harsher end of things. Have you got examples of kindness around digital inclusion that you can think of?
Well, I think it's a word that translates easily, kindness, rather than empathy, which is what I tend to provoke and promote. So the kindness aspect, I think, is something that happens of itself, and the lovely surprises. A group I'm working with, have done for a couple of years. There's an elderly lady that comes each week, so comfortable she would bring her slippers as well, bless her. And during the lockdown phase, she was stuck at home a bit, and one of the members of the group took it upon themselves to go and visit. And I didn't know anything. I actually, she never told me a thing. Only the lady herself told me. So I think there's these little things that are the acts of kindness. It's always, it reminds me a little bit of the library in Hackney that didn't lend out books for a few days. It lent out people. You got to listen to their stories, which is a wonderful idea. There's an empathy library online as well, where you can go to read books that are about the topic and promote the empathy and the films too. So I think yes, I think Leeds has a bit of a benefit having the head of I think it's NHS England based there. So I think that lends a certain flavour to the place. And I think that would, I think kindness is a lovely thing to spread around, especially when it's so easy to forget a little bit of humanity.
I'm sure you've seen plenty of kindness in Orkney as well, Swain. In
Yes.
a smaller community, maybe it's easier.
Maybe. We have our full spectrum of humanity here, of course. But it's perhaps easier to see the kindnesses that are happening here. It's perhaps easier to see them because you're closer to everyone. There are fewer people than it is perhaps to see all the kindness that is no doubt also going on in all sorts of other bigger places. It's a bit of a trap to fall into the assumption that smaller places are kinder. I mean, they might be or they might not be. And it's it's really hard to say.
Thanks for that. And sticking with Leeds, this week they're starting their digital festival, and this is something obviously that in the past they would have run face to face, but they've gone online, and it's from the 21st September to the 2nd of October. And in this festival they've got 294 events, so we're assuming that there's something for everyone. I think there's a lot of business type events happening in it, but also other events that will include inclusion. I did a search while we were preparing for the program about inclusion on the website here, and I think it's more about inclusivity and diversity, but that will include Obviously, if everything's being presented online, then that's going to be inclusive at some level anyway. So good luck to Leeds, and we look forward to hearing more about what the success of that festival week. And then we come on to some of our kind of traditional stories about helping care home residents being connected. And this is one from Milton Keynes, where residents at Milton Court Care Home in Kents Hill, Milton Keynes, have received a Facebook portal, which is a device we've talked about again in this show, to help them stay connected with their loved ones during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this was one of 5 portals donated to care homes across the southeast by Barrett and David Wilson Homes. And the devices will be available for all of the residents to use to help them stay in touch with their family and friends when they're unable to see them face to face. And this is to help them improve their mental well-being. So we're hoping at some stage to get somebody on the show who's actually used a portal, because so far we've only been able to talk about them, to recommend them as a device that seemed like something very useful. But here's a care home installing one, and we're hoping to hear how well they get on. We haven't heard any more about Portal, I think, from any other sources since we last talked about it with John, I think.
I don't think so. No.
No.
There was the news
wonder
that the cost of them had come down a bit again.
Yeah.
But I think that was the
right.
last thing we had.
You haven't seen one in action, Paul, have you?
No.
No.
I've got a sneaky feeling it could be a lot of people, a lot of older people associate Facebook with a lot of fighting online and aggressive opinionated approaches and all sorts of radicals, etc. So I think what it is I think the association doesn't lend itself, and I haven't heard of anyone talking about it either, which is intriguing.
I think we talked about it in the very early shows, didn't we, Swain? And John felt that it would be very useful for people, especially now as more lately the prices have come down. So yes, maybe the branding needs a bit of work. And I think they are. When I see it advertised, I think they're emphasizing the portal bit of it, and rather than the Facebook bit. So
it's the connection with your family in an easy and non-technical way. That's that's the selling point.
Yeah, and the fact that it follows you around the room, so that you don't have to locate it very carefully somewhere and kind of.
But of course,
make sure you're in shot. It'll follow you.
Corporations like Facebook are incapable of not promoting themselves if they get a chance. So
yeah, I've seen adverts for it, and they have seemed very positive. So we'll hope to get somebody on, as we say, or get one of us to do testing. We have Swain and I have talked before about buying kit in order to for testing purposes.
Not because we want a fancy new thing.
Certainly not.
Because we're trying to reduce what we're buying, aren't we, Pauline?
We are. So moving on, we're talking again, expanding our horizons about a project in Singapore, which is a volunteer program where older citizens are being helped with their isolation. There's about 560,000 people aged 65 and over, making up 1/5 of the total population in Singapore. And to bridge their technology gap, Singapore's Infocom Media Development Authority and its corporate partners have launched virtual digital clinics as part of its digital inclusion efforts. And this is a program that helps seniors to get advice from volunteers and to access essential digital services from home. And the great thing about this is that the project is offered not just in English, because not everybody has English as a first language, and why should they? But the clinics are being offered in Mandarin, also Malay and Tamil, which are, including English, the 4 official languages of Singapore. And this obviously one of the issues is that most apps are only available in English, and then seniors face difficulties retaining the knowledge they've acquired. So far, about 270 seniors have benefited from the clinics, and they expect to reach even more seniors throughout the next year. I don't know if either of you have ever been able to help anybody for whom English wasn't a first language, or English was an additional language. But I've had some experience in Birmingham, and you know, you get people who you know, speak more than one language, but their literacy levels, their reading level might not be you know, adequate for presentation. So we often rely on video, you know, video to explain what people need to know. And I'm aware of the Chinese Community Centre in Birmingham are doing some amazing diagrams, you know, helping to explain the latest regulations around COVID, and you know, what you can and can't do with different groups of people. So I think graphics are always a good way of presenting information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
I worked with a Moroccan lady once who was visually impaired, and she could speak English, but her English wasn't great, and she could just about read it. So we used Siri to try and promote a bit of feedback for her, like a feedback loop for her, and to get it to read out things for her as well. So it was a bit of both. I think it's really interesting trying to actually bridge that gap, and yeah, it does seem that we do have that option, because it's pictures and audio that you can offer diagrams. But I think it does help to know the language as well, to be able to bridge things again. I can't say my language skills are pretty poor. I tend to learn to bless, curse, please, and thank you wherever I go. So trying to show how to use something is awkward. But I noticed very quickly that it was a Microsoft news page that you put up there, and also noticed how they extolled how Teams was so easy to set up. I thought that was quite a nice bit of
Yes,
propaganda.
I avoided mentioning any brands in my coverage of the story, because obviously there's lots of different brands that we're all happy to explore and research. But you know, we're not paid to recommend any particular recommend brand. What about you, Swain, and sort of language and explaining
No,
things to people?
I have not. Don't have a lot of experience in that area at all. The closest I think possibly is that, perhaps not quite so much now. In Orkney, there's kind of a problem of comprehension through dialect, particularly older people using very strong dialect or very strong accents, and people who are either from a different part of Orkney or from elsewhere in the world trying to provide services. It is nearly a language barrier, but it's nothing like as significant, because the person usually can understand what you are saying, even if you struggle or need to try again to understand what they're saying back.
Yeah, but I think even in English, when it comes to digital, we often have our own vocabulary, don't we, that we're familiar with and we're comfortable with, but it isn't the same for everybody who hasn't, you know, been around the same geeky type of people, shall we say. So I think we need to also be cognizant of that. And you know, my mum, for example, who I often talk about on the show, when she talks about video calling, she always says Skype, whatever platform it is, it's Skyping, so WhatsApp or Zoom or whatever. And you know, we all know, everybody all in the family knows what she means, and we all can relate to that. But it's like one of those words like Hoover that has become pejorative. And I think sometimes, and again, and another one, in the digital support I'm offering through Aging Better in Birmingham, iPads, people often say iPad when they mean tablet. And you have to be very clear that what they're asking for is not a more expensive brand of device, but a device that will help them get connected, and it doesn't have to be the more expensive end of the market, shall we say.
Sure.
I'm sure we all have stories about, you know, not dumbing down, but sort of just not making assumptions, and not trying to, you know, people feel excluded if you use language that you know, you feel very comfortable with, but they don't always relate to. So it's good to be reminded of that from time to time.
I think it's that what you're mentioning there is what I call brand orientation, and it's effectively how you know, people don't go on the internet; they go googling.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
And I've had to spend a lot of time saying I actually have a quiz, and one of the questions is which is a search engine and which is a web browser.
Yeah.
And people often the search engine, and they
Yeah.
don't, and they find it. So I think you're quite right there. Everything is a Skype or a FaceTime or whatever. It becomes a brand name and not the actual process or anything that's been undertaken.
I like the sound of that.
I'm very careful of that.
I like the sound of the quiz. I think maybe we should do that sometime. Is it long?
No, it's not long. No,
Yeah.
it's not all geeky. I've had to change it a little bit. Just to be a bit more open and stop people falling asleep on me.
It sounds good. So again, we're talking about care homes and people getting help. And this one, the next story comes from Jersey, and a care home called Les Ume Care Home in Jersey, and which locked down obviously when COVID-19 hit. But that obviously meant that elderly residents and their families were separated and unable to hug or celebrate birthdays. So the activities coordinator there, James Sargent, set out to keep people connected, and he acquired an iPad. Could have acquired another device, but he acquired an iPad, and he was able to identify the residents and families who were keen to stay connected via video technology. Obviously, not everybody is. Lots of people, even during lockdown, have managed their contact with other people in different ways, and not through technology, and that's fine if that's what they want. But James was saying that he encountered two problems with the trying to set up these calls. And the first was the iPad. The iPad was too small for the residents to see their family, and that made them not very happy with the technology. So he worked out how to link the iPad to the big screen TV in the home so they could see and hear far more clearly. And the family then also had the feeling of being in the room with the residents. And the second problem was that some families wanted to use WhatsApp, and iPads don't sync with that technology. So he used his own iPhone and linked it to the TV, which enabled to see the individual see their family from the comfort of their own room. And again, here's somebody who, is just uses a bit of lateral thinking, I suppose, and works out how to link a device up with a big screen, a TV. We've talked about that on the show before, smart TV, HDMI connection or something like that. And again, with WhatsApp, the device doesn't allow you to use WhatsApp, so you just create a workaround. I'm sure you've both done that in your careers as IT people.
Now and again. This is great to hear an activity coordinator so engaged to be able to think that way, because in my experience, it's not always the case. Activity coordinators tend to be very good at arts and crafts without being undermining arts and crafts. But yeah, I've had to jury rig and mess around with all sorts of things to make it work for a particular purpose, but not have to reinvent wheels, just to use it in a different way. But that's a great story.
That's a great story. We need to try and see if we can make contact with James and see if he can come on the program. I think
that'd be great. Yeah,
it'd be interesting to hear from him. As far as I'm concerned, well, in IT, there's a well-known saying: there's no such thing as an IT system that isn't an interim IT system. So yes, workarounds, lash ups, gaffer tape. Logical
Patches.
gaffer tape, it's kind of concept.
Yeah, and similarly with learning,
very long cables, another thing that can get you out of all sorts of trouble.
Absolutely. Gaffer tape.
Gaffer tape and very long cables. Yeah.
My colleague Ted Ryan talks about patch learning. Again, similarly, you identify that somebody has a gap in their learning to be able to go from what they know to what would help them know be happier or find something more useful in what they want to do. So you do the patch learning, you teach them what they need to know right immediately, and then they can carry on and sort of enjoy their newly found information and expand their knowledge.
Now your next story, Pauline, is something I haven't tried before, which is trying to display a YouTube clip in the call. So I'm not quite sure how it'll work. We'll give it a go, and you can. There may be sound, so we may have to wait the 1 minute 44 seconds till we play the video.
Okay,
I
so
don't
it's
know, but
it's
I shouldn't be talking because I can't do it at the same time.
and this was a story that once again John Popham picked up along the way, called Citizen Sim, which was an idea to help solve the digital poverty crisis in the UK.
Here it
And this
goes.
is a data bank taking unused data. Apparently there is 165 million gigs and growing in the UK of unused data. And the idea was to donate that to children and young people in care, ex-offenders, elderly, employed, and so on and so on. And that sounds like a brilliant
So
thing. So we try and
this
play the
video takes about 1 3/4 minutes. So here we go. You should be able to hear it. You should be able to see it. It might be a bit jerky. It won't be very good quality, but here we go. 2 minutes. Oh.
Between those online and those not. On one side, 5 million adults do not have internet access, creating a world of disadvantage when so much can now only be accessed online. And tragically, 1.3 million children are not online at home or in care, eroding life chances dramatically. Yet on the other side, millions enjoy positive digital experiences with unlimited access to whatever they want, when they want it, taking being online for granted. How big is the digital divide? We'll consider this. People who are digital included are sitting on a staggering 165 million gigabytes of unused data. If this was a cake, each one of those 5 million disadvantaged adults would get a slice equivalent to nearly 400 hours of being online. And remember, this divide has not occurred just because of the pandemic. It has been widening for many years now. So how can we design a platform to help? Introducing an idea for a Citizen Sim data bank. Citizens with unused data opt into the data bank, and those 5 million without access opt into the data bank and get valuable data to get online. Citizen Sim is not the full answer, of course. We need devices, data, and initiatives for digital literacy skills. A data bank might give industry and government a fresh idea to help those caught in the digital divide. If we think differently, Citizen Sim could be a human-centric way to help each other before it is too late for many.
That's really excellent.
Isn't it?
You know, it's just perfect. I mean, we have again on this show talked about data poverty before and the poverty that comes with not having access to data or not being able to afford it. And that sounds like a brilliant scheme.
I'm speechless because it worked to play out, so that's great.
Always good.
Good on you, Swen. It's good when it works.
What were you saying, Paul?
I was saying that I was at a People's Parliament of people with learning difficulties recently. I'm going to be assisting an organisation that helps those with learning difficulties, and this is very relevant to them because some of them aren't interested and some of them don't have any access and some of them don't have any devices. And given the amount of mobile phones, as I said before, there's no reason why not sometimes. And something like this would be great. I'm intrigued by the logistics of it, though. I say I love the concept, but it's the logistics of it. It's not like you can store it in big vats and then pipe it somewhere else. It's
Yeah, I'd be
I
interested to
use
hear
the
more
water
about that.
analogy a lot. Yeah.
What were you saying, Swain?
Sorry, just that it would need some kind of coordination, and I'm not sure that anybody except the phone companies would necessarily be in a position to do it.
And they wouldn't be. They would be less inclined to do it, wouldn't they? Because it's
They'd have to be
possibly
kind
eating
of
into their profits.
encouraged to do it for certain types of person or certain digitally excluded people. I don't know.
It sounds like though an idea that kind of its time is certainly coming, if not come, and there is more encouragement for that. And the DCMS report that we had on a previous show about, and addressing digital inclusion did say about data poverty. So I think if we give our politicians information like this, they could well make good use of it.
I could imagine it eventually becoming some kind of public service obligation on phone companies to do this for some classes of people. But I think it would have to be done, I think, through, as you say, through the political route or through the regulation route at the very least.
Yeah. certainly.
I
Well, we
think there was
watched that with interest. Sorry.
yeah.
Paul.
I was going to say that I was in talk once, and I was talking about accessibility. This was a number of years ago, but every time I look up anything to do about smart cities, it always seems to be about saving councils money and never about digital access as a utility. It's sort of the no-brainer.
Yeah.
And and I think that this is where it sort of begins. There are around Southeast London, there are little USB charging points that have hotspots in them as well. You might find them elsewhere as in other cities, but it seems a strange phenomenon that we're sort of shrinking down the utility of it, and how we have to go down other routes to actually provide again. It'd be great if we could siphon off the surplus data that we're not using, though. I think that's really the big idea.
Yeah.
I think we could talk about the digital divide. I mean, in fuel terms, we have the concept of fuel poverty, and I think we could possibly have a concept of digital poverty, even that where the cost of data or of devices is more than a certain proportion of your income, say, that help could be provided. And I think as you say, you mentioned digital stuff as almost a utility. Well, let's use some of the same equality measures as are used in the utilities.
And it's a good thing to think about our privilege as, those of us who do have access to digital and data, think about the privilege that we have, and then that to extend that thinking to, maybe we can share some of that privilege with other people. So not to just give away the data we don't need, but maybe give away some of the data we do need and use a bit less ourselves, go back to the reuse, recycle theme, and just share out the wealth, share out the the fact that we're lucky enough to have this, and let's make it available to other people as well. Okay.
I see this in sheltered accommodation.
Yeah.
Just to string that out a bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, very much the case. You can get one person in a flat and next door doesn't have any access at all.
Yeah. That doesn't seem right. Okay, so and this next story is one that I'd love to see in kind of all over the world, but this is one that's coming from the States, Colorado, where low-income residents could get a computer for $20. So PCs for People is a national nonprofit which provides affordable access to technology by professionally refurbishing computers. And before the pandemic, officials with the agency said they used to refurbish about 500 computers a month, and now they do about 1,500 of them with less staff as well, which is amazing. So obviously the pandemic brought to life an existing problem of people not having devices at home, and now obviously people have more need than ever. So CenturyLink, which is another company, is giving the agency $50,000 to help make computers more accessible to students and families for home learning, for access to telehealth and more. Obviously, it's been seen as an essential thing to have for students and families. And they're certainly doing something about it. So individuals and families can order low-cost computers for $20 each and have them shipped directly to their home at no additional cost. So it just says to me that this can be done, and it's a choice people are making. Certain people who have the power are making to not make that happen. So $20 for a computer. Folks, what do you think about a $20 computer? Oh, well, it's a nominal cost, it's a nominal contribution towards the computer.
It is. It's a great idea. Nothing wrong with that. I think giving them away always undermines anything. People don't respect things for free quite often, but just paying a nominal cost for something that just changes a lot of things, great. Yeah, I think it's the only slight misgiving would be that the expectations might be a little bit high for sometimes. They're not going to get a full-on gaming machine for that, and the youngsters might expect that. But Otherwise,
There are issues with refurbished machines and their fitness for whatever purpose the recipient wants to put them to. There's also the issues that we touched on a wee bit earlier when we were talking about phones and the limits, the limits that the hardware imposes on potential software upgrades as time passes. The older the hardware, the more difficult it is to keep them up to date with security patches or indeed editions of Linux, or if you really are going to go down the Windows route, Windows. So yeah, I think for general purpose devices for use of for use for sort of mainstream stuff, it's a very, very good idea, as long as we're not trying to give devices that are too old. There is a limit.
Yeah. And of course, as we said before, just because you have a device doesn't mean you know how to use it or to get the best use out of it. So that, that package needs to be accompanied with training or support or some kind of assistance when it's needed, so that the device does get used and isn't just left and abandoned. So back to the UK, and we've got a story about the Cambridgeshire Digital Partnership, which is a group of organisations in Cambridgeshire committed to ending digital inequality and ensuring everyone is able to benefit from technology and digital innovations. And they've got a Cambridgeshire Digital Week coming up on the 19th to the 23rd of October. So it's good to see around the country, people are doing things about digital. If you can scroll down a bit, Swain, we can see what the sessions are. So on the 19th of October, Digital Divide, what does the research tell us? 20th of October, Digital Inequality and Social Exclusion. 21st of October, Digital Stories, Supporting the Asian Community Get Online. Always good to support communities that might be underrepresented. 21st of October, also engaging and supporting people to bridge the digital divide. 22nd of October, how can digital solutions enhance social inclusion? 23rd of October, Raspberry Pis and digital inclusion for young people, part 1. Might not be just young people. And then 23rd of October, also Raspberry Pis and digital inclusion for young people, part 2. So that sounds like a great selection of topics for people to get their digital teeth into. Any of those particularly appeal to you, Paul or Swain?
Yeah, I mean, they all look interesting, frankly.
I quite fancy the one. What does the research tell us? That might be quite a neat way of catching up with a lot of things that we might have missed.
I find it hard as the program goes on to think we're missing very much, but yeah, it would be good to catch up. I should have some humility about this because obviously I don't know everything.
No, come on, Pauline. Come on.
I do digital. I know I do digital. I must know everything. No. Yeah, I'd like to.
I think that's what everyone else is saying.
Yeah. I'd like to go to the digital stories one as well, but for the Asian community, partly because I work with the Asian community so much myself, but also just it's useful to hear from again, like I say, underrepresented groups on here that what's happening and what we need to be mindful of. The Asian community is a big part of life in Britain, and it'd be good to hear what's needed.
I think the other one that appeals to me is the engaging and supporting people to bridge the digital divide, because we keep coming back to that sort of topic. It's not all about bandwidth. It's not all about devices. It's about person-to-person support and help and engagement. It's a great word in its way.
Yeah.
I think we tend the commercial and corporate angles and the government tend to have the whole roles reversed. Because what it is, the whole of the digital overlay is just that. It's what we already do. It's nothing. It's not. They're newer ways of doing things, but we still need each other. You know, and we still relate to one another. The digital stuff connects us up and enables us to communicate and share information. And I think this is probably the first time in any history book I've ever read that we've got so much around. So, more so now than ever that we need an element of humanity to pin it down and keep us from being hypnotized by our screens, really.
Absolutely.
Getting poetical.
No, I think you're hitting the nail.
8.5 minutes to keep it under control, so that's fine.
Okie doke. We're down to our last 3 stories. Hopefully we'll get through them all. The next one is in my neck of the woods, Redditch, a Redditch granny who praises technology for keeping her connected. And this is about a woman in her 90s who has been allowed to connect with her granddaughter during the coronavirus pandemic because of technology. So obviously she was unable to meet her family members face to face for months, and she's 93 and she's receiving care from a care provider in Redditch and Bromsgrove, and her care supervisor has set her up with Facebook Portal, which allows people to communicate virtually. She calls the device a magic box, which allows her to regularly speak with her granddaughter who lives in Belgium. And a recent survey by this care provider found that 75% of older people have used technology to contact their family during the pandemic, which is really good to hear. A statistic like that, 75%. I wonder what the baseline was, what it was like before, but I'm sure it wasn't 75%.
No,
No,
it's a great story,
likely.
that one. I love that story.
Yeah,
It is.
Yeah.
It's a cracker. I like how she calls it a magic box.
Yes,
That works for me.
yeah.
I sympathise with that because it is kind of magic, isn't it?
It can seem like that, yeah. Okay, so we're swiftly covering our last 2 stories for this issue, and this is one that Chian Wura, the Labour MP for Newcastle Central and Shadow Minister for Science, Research and Digital, wrote about Labour's digital policy. They're consulting on it at the moment, and where should Labour take the policy? And they're asking questions like, how can we ensure no one's excluded from the digital revolution, and what are the main barriers to digital inclusion? And how can we remove them? So they're asking people to respond to this, and they want to produce a set of principles to guide Labour's digital policy for the long term. And they're asking for Labour members, trade unions, small and growing businesses, charities and others to answer the questions that we've posed. So they also asked, about promoting digital innovation across all the UK's regions and nations, ensuring the generation of good, fulfilling jobs for everyone. What principles should govern our lives online and protect us against all harm? I mean, safety is a watchword, I think, for all of us. But we want to make sure that we protect people from the harm that can be played out online. How can we put people in charge of their online lives? Do we need stricter or different rules for how large corporations and public bodies use our personal data? They're asking, how can the government better use tech to work for the public? And then finally, back to the last question, which I asked at the beginning, how can we ensure no one's excluded from the digital revolution, and what are the main barriers to digital inclusion, and how can we remove them? So I think, programs like this, I have to say, hopefully will it help some people to address those questions and provoke conversation, if nothing else. I know I'm talking about the Dr. Tech show in other places that I go to, and Paul, you are as well, and Swain, to promote radio or YouTube, a video like this, I think can help people to explore some of the things in a kind of a relaxed way.
It's great to see these questions come up unambiguously in the political sphere, because they are questions that all organisations and all parties of whatever colour should be asking. I mean, they're not party political, really. They are general questions which, as we always say about digital, it should empower and affect and improve everything, and that goes for political proposals as much as anything else, surely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I remember Fax Your MP, which was a gateway. The MPs back in the late 90s didn't have email. They just had faxes. And some bright spark had set up a fax gateway that you could email to, and you could point your fax at a particular MP. The point being that what happens is that you can have all the connectivity you like, but it's how those people talk to one another is really the key part. And I'm sort of coming back to my point about humanity. I think what happens is if you can get good community cohesion and a sense of locality, that people can spot the issues a little bit more and offer to help more. Like coming back to sharing an internet connection with your next door neighbour, if you've got full on fibre and you're not using it all day, and you've got someone next door who could use it, well, why not share it with them? So these are the sort of the human aspects, I think, that that come into play just as much as the bigger political ideas, which it should be a human first and digital as an addition, to an enhancement, not a replacement.
Absolutely.
I think that's also a big issue for a lot of older people who worry about how everything is online now.
Yeah. And so we're finishing today's program with an event on the 1st of October called Each One Reach One. And again, we're coming back to our friends in Leeds. Their City Council Digital Partnership event. This is to mark National Inclusion Week, which is September 28th to October 4th. And this event will focus on key areas such as creating inclusive workplaces, overcoming barriers and creating inclusive workplaces, sharing good practice, importance of allies, what more can be done to create truly inclusive workplaces, and the new normal, which is a phrase we're all far too familiar with. And one of the discussion sessions is on digital inclusion, increasing opportunities for digitally inclusive workplaces. And this is led by Dr. Nasser Siabi, OBE, from the CEO of Microlinks. And I think that's a nice story to end on. And to see how digital inclusion gets built into events that aren't necessarily about digital, but they can incorporate it. So I think we're coming to the end of the show now. Any final words from my two co-presenters, Swain, Paul?
No, I think I've said everything I need to say. I mean, I could just keep on stringing things out otherwise. But yes, I've thoroughly enjoyed everything you've shown today.
Well, thanks again for joining us. We are sorry that John Popham hasn't been able to join us again this week, but we hopefully will see him in future weeks. He is, we think, improving, and we send him all our best wishes for an even speedier recovery than possible. And we hope to hear from him again very, very soon. But again, Paul, thanks for contributing and being a relaxed co-presenter. It's always, we think a three-way works really well on this. Swain, do you want to add anything?
No, the only thing I'm would add really is it's good to see so much of Leeds in this week's show.
Yeah.
They seem to have really done a lot in these last few weeks.
Well, I think it reflects back on our social media management capabilities that we're able to pick up online, great stories like this. And what happens, Paul, in between shows, we share things in a Facebook Messenger chat,
right?
And then we use them on the show, so that works really well.
Yes.
Great
so
stuff.
On that note, we should probably wrap things up and look forward to next week's episode.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.